Welcome to episode 88 of the Camerosity podcast, the world's #1 open source film and digital photography podcast. My name is Mike Ekman, and we are back with another exciting episode. Tonight, we are packing our bags and going on our second ever 3-hour tour to a tropical paradise full of breathtaking vistas and photographic opportunities. Although we will only have 3 hours on the island, you need to pack light so everyone going can only bring 3 cameras. Which 3 will it be? Before we board the ship, let's introduce the captains of this once-in-a-lifetime voyage. Starting us off from sunny Florida, where the weather is never problematic, is Mr. Anthony Rue. Hey Anthony, what is the weather forecast looking like down there for the next couple of days?
Freezing drizzle. Well, actually, not quite freezing. It's about 45 degrees and just pissing down rain.
Next, our entertainment MC from the state that is round on both ends is Mr. Paul Reibold. Hey Paul, what kind of quality Americana music do you have planned for our trip?
You know, I was thinking about maybe some sea shanties, since we're going to be out on the bounding main. Something salty, maybe a theme from Popeye or something.
And last but not least is the newest member of our crew. From the Great White North in Saskatchewan, Canada, is our master chef, Stephen Strangways. Hey, Stephen, what kind of northern cuisine do you have planned for our guests?
Well, I would say something like seal blubber would probably fit the stereotype, but we actually have a wide variety of cuisine up here. It's kind of like we're almost a civilized nation.
All right, I can see our guests are already making it up the gangway onto the ship. Everyone to your posts, and let's welcome everyone aboard. We got Will Pinkham. Welcome back, Will.
See everybody.
Ready to go on our adventure?
Yeah.
Christopher Wells. Hey, Christopher, how you doing?
Hi, guys. Doing well.
It's been a while. I haven't seen you. I can't even remember last time you were on the show.
Yeah, I was here for the 80s cameras episode. That was the only one I've been on.
Well, we're coming up with 90 pretty soon. Where are you from again?
I live in Charlotte, North Carolina.
That's right. Okay. AJ, welcome back, AJ.
Hey, guys.
Robin Stone. I recognize your name, but I don't think you've been on the show before. First time caller. Where are you calling from?
Pinkham, Virginia, just a little west of Richmond.
Richmond, Virginia. Awesome. Sweet. Well, welcome aboard, everybody. We just got started. We've done this once before, and we had a lot of fun with it, so we thought, what the heck, let's do it again. Let's see, another person just joined. Andrew Wells. Welcome back, Andrew.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, so let's get going. So we have Paul is going to do some sea shanties for us. Stephen is cooking us some Canadian cuisine. And Anthony has assured us the weather is going to be very crappy. So hopefully that doesn't mess up with our trip here. You know, we talked about cameras that we would want to be stranded on a desert island with. Or maybe you could just interpret it as if you had to pare your collection down to just 3. Which ones would you want? We actually Anthony went back and found the show notes for us from the last time we did this just to make sure none of us picked the same 3 cameras again. But I remember when I picked my 3, I did it with the eye of what are the most reliable, dependable cameras that would survive a rugged, being on the beach or something like that. So this time I'm kind of just going with cameras I'd want to be stuck with using for a very long time. Reliability be damned, because quite frankly, I don't know how many laptops with USB drives we'd have for digital cameras, but you never know. Digital could be used too. So Robin, let's start with you since you're the first time caller. You had to know that was coming, right?
Yeah, I kind of figured it would be there.
Well, what kind of cameras do you shoot in general, though? Before you get on the boat, what's your favorite type of photography?
Well, I like to do a lot of studio work, still life, portraits, things like that. My go-to camera right now is my Horseman VH. I love that camera. It's like, personally, it's the only camera I think you really need.
Except for when you want to stick it in your pocket.
True. That's why I went out and bought a Zeiss Iconta.
There you go. All right.
That's a good pocket. That's a good pocket camera there.
Very good.
I'm loving that thing.
All right. So you do a lot of studio photography then. Do you do it professionally or just for fun?
It's a hobby. Years ago, I did it professionally, and then found out it didn't pay very well. So I went back and honed up on my IT skills. So.
Okay. Well, are you going to load that Horseman up on the boat and carry it in your luggage, or do you have something else in mind?
No, I'll take the Horseman, and if nothing else, it's a good boat anchor.
Yeah. That it is. AJ, I know you like Horseman too, but you have a Horseman back. right? The roll film for your horsemen.
Exactly.
We've talked about
Yeah.
that before.
Absolutely.
Where is the journey going to take you?
Well, if I'm going 35 millimeter, just because my Zeiss Icon is kind of in the fritz right now, I got a shutter problem with it. I would go 35 millimeter with my Retina 3C,
Oh, good.
and I would take for a 6x9. I'm privy to your Kodak Tourist.
Well, wait. You can't bring that on the boat because I haven't seen any sample images from it yet.
They're coming. They're
They're
coming.
coming.
I swear they're coming.
For anybody who doesn't get the joke, I was recommending that camera to AJ, and he's like, every time I look, I can't find a good one. And then, like, that same night, I opened a box, and there was a nice, shiny Tourist, a duplicate of one that I already had. I go, here, give me your address, and I'll send it to you. We've talked about this before. It's getting harder and harder to send things to Canada. And Stephen had, I think you shared one of the reasons why for that if you fill out the customs form and say that it's a camera, even though it's an old mechanical one, they assume it has lithium ion batteries and then they reject it, right? Isn't that the biggest challenge right now?
Yeah, and sadly, what happened was I had a camera shipped from Ukraine to Canada by air. They refused to put it on a truck and drive it to my parents' house and deliver it because it couldn't be shipped by air. So they promptly decided to return it to sender, and they got UA and AU confused. So they shipped it by air to Australia.
Oh, geez. No.
It made it maybe a short drive from your house, and then it ended up in Australia.
Yep. And I recently thought it might be coming back from Australia, but it turned out to actually be something else. It was not that camera. So that camera has now been lost in Australia for the past several months.
Oh, no.
What camera was it?
It was an Olympus Stylus Verve. Well, actually, it was the European model, the Mew Mini. And it was just a really rare color that I think was only sold in Eastern Europe. So I was very excited to get that, but doesn't look like it's going to work out.
Well, you'll notice that Theo is not with us today, so I think that's rather suspect as to where in Australia your camera might be.
Yeah, I was thinking I should send him on a mission to go retrieve it, but I hear
bet he
Australia's
already-
a
I think
pretty
he already
big
has
country.
it.
No, what you need to do is start driving up and down within a 1 kilometer circle of your home and start looking in the ditches on the road. See if you find any packages there. That's work for Anthony.
It works for Anthony. It could work again.
Yeah.
This is probably around a ditch in postal warehouse in Australia somewhere.
Yeah. We found out, and I think I kind of already knew this, but I didn't really realize the extent of how much of an Olympus fanboy Stephen is. I got to see his Olympus wall, and he's got a lot of really cool cameras on there. There was one that I had to ask you about. It was a microscope camera, which I thought just looks cool. You know, it just had. I was attracted to the large bayonet mount on it, but apparently you can't mount a lens to that. But then I told you that I'm working on a review for an Olympus Ace, which I'm looking forward to shooting because those are. I think they're cool cameras. I wish Olympus had invested further in that system, but they didn't.
Yeah, I think you only saw about 2 shells of, 12 shells. So I've actually filled 2 bookcases worth, and pretty soon going to have to pick up a third bookcase to sort everything out. And that's just the Olympus cameras. There's a whole other display case for the non-Olympus cameras.
And you're a big fan of the IKEA Billies, right?
I just had them around for something else and have reused them, but I've ended up accidentally matching Theo on that, I think.
Yeah. Theo uses the Billies. Vlad Kern uses them. They're really wonderful because they have an optional glass door you could attach to kind of help keep some of the dust out. But when you start piecing it together, they can get quite pricey. I remember when IKEA was inexpensive, and it's not so much anymore. All right. So shipping things to Canada, bad idea. I am happy, though, that I was able to get that tourist to AJ. So AJ, along with your passport getting on the boat, I need to see some sample images before you can officially call yourself a tourist. I'm obviously kidding. I'm sure they're going to look good, but
It's okay. Don't worry.
I'm just excited to hear your thoughts on it because that's not a camera I think too many people would recommend, the Kodak Tourist. Anthony, how you doing, man?
Doing okay.
Okay. So what's in your bag?
Well, I'm going to start big and wide. And if I'm going to be on a shipwrecked on a tropical island, on a deserted island, I want to shoot panoramas. So, of course, I'm going to take the Fuji G617 with an unlimited supply of 220 film so that I can crank off those 8 shots and just really work on my panoramic composition.
We're gonna have to put you and Robin on opposite sides of the boat to help balance the weight from those two big heavy cameras you're gonna bring with.
Surprisingly, it's all plastic, so it's not
Is it
that
really?
heavy.
Yeah, that's true. It just looks
I,
big.
I bet that, the last time we went on this cruise, I took a Medalist along, and I'd bet that the Medalist is heavier than the 617.
We just had Ira Cohen jump on board.
Howdy.
Hey, Ira, and we got on voyage, Ira, and we're already starting to go through the first camera we're bringing with us. What would be your desert island camera?
If I absolutely positively had to take one camera that I knew was going to both be reliable, accurate, and in an emergency could be used as a hammer to build a shed out of coconut tree trunks, I'd pick a Nikon F2.
F2, yeah. I think that was the one I chose for the last episode. I agree 100%. Like, in all seriousness, that would be a desert island camera for me. For me, I came up with 3 new ones, but yes, that's a very good one. I've shared my fondness for that camera. I think while I absolutely respect and adore the historical significance of the original F, I think that all the improvements they made to the F2 make it a significantly better camera. Anthony, you probably thought I was crazy when I talked so much about the backwards shutter release location of the Nikon rangefinders and the original F until I loaned 2 of them to you. And you were like, you're right. The location of the shutter release on both the Nikon rangefinders and the F is just far enough back that it's just slightly awkward. And when you just move that thing forward a 1/4 inch, like they did on the F2, big difference.
One thing I do not like and never have liked about the Nikon bayonet, though, it's backwards.
Backwards. Everything's backwards. Even focusing and the aperture ring is backwards.
Yeah, it's very, very weird. I had been using a Minolta Maxim 7000 before that, so I kind of got used to the bayonet. Before that, I had a Pentax, so the screw mount. But in terms of Minolta, it felt normal to take the lens off and put it on. The Nikon was always counterintuitive.
Well, you know who we have to blame for that, right?
Zeiss, probably.
Yep. Dr. Heinz Kuppenbender. Because we'll figure Nikon, the rangefinders use the lens mount based off of the Contax rangefinder, the Contax lens mount. And if you look at a Zeiss Icon Contax, it goes the same direction as the Nikon F mount. So I think when Nippon Kugaku just was switching to SLRs, they just did what they knew, and that the Nikon F mount matches the same orientation as the rangefinder lenses do.
Yep.
So we could blame Zeiss.
Always blame the other guy.
But no, yeah, the F2, great camera. It's rugged. It's thorough. I'm lucky enough to have the AS model with the prism that has both LEDs and it supports modern batteries, and the automatic indexing lenses, which makes it a little bit easier to couple. It has the hinge door instead of the removable back. The battery is relocated to the body instead of the viewfinder. The photomic viewfinders on the F2s just don't look nearly as weird as the ones on the F2. So
you see, the thing is, if you're going to be in a desert island, you really don't want all that extra weight of the metered finder, because the batteries aren't going to work after a couple of weeks.
That's true.
So I'm going with the pure pentaprism.
I was just going to say that's one of the reasons for my choice of the Horseman was all mechanical. But if Ira's camera is the hammer, mine's the pour over coffee maker.
All right, at least you got some coffee. Anthony will bring some beans with us. All right, Andrew, what's something that if you had to limit yourself down, you want to have with you?
Well, I have a great answer now, an update from the medium format SLR episode. I got my grubby little hands on my very own SL66, and I'm absolutely in love with the system, and I will take it anywhere with me.
I was going to name the SL66 as well, even though I was going to have to conjure mine because I foolishly handed mine that I was testing back to Paul instead of just being smart and buying it off of him, because I absolutely fell in love with that camera, and his was a pristine copy, and it had full lens kit with it, and I don't know why I didn't sell my blood plasma and bring the cash together and just buy it off of him. Another one of our Camerosity listeners, picked the camera up and is absolutely in love with it. I'm glad that he has it and he's giving it lots of use, but that camera's got the magic in it. You know, that really is a cool camera to pick. And I wholeheartedly endorse your selection of the SL66 on the desert island.
Yeah, thank you very much. I have a little funky story with it. I got the body off of eBay. I I lowballed someone with an offer. It was some vintage store in Kentucky was selling it, and they just said that they said shutter stuck up was the description, and I kind of gambled on that just being a mirror jam, and so I got the body for a couple $100 and opened it up. So like if you look at it, it's got a black side panel. So I think somebody it had taken a drop or something at some point and they replaced it with a factory panel. Insides are in great shape, but they were not assembled properly. I had to pour over the German manuals and kind of figure out how to get everything in phase properly. Once I did, it has been chugging along just fine. But I have the 150 sonar and just recently got a 50 Distagon. It's one of the
Wow.
HFT coated ones, and I
Very nice.
absolutely love the wide angle. And again, my little my extra use of the SL66 for the desert island adventure is when you reverse mount the lens, specifically the 50 millimeter, it turns into a microscope. I don't know the exact numbers. I think it enlarges like times 3 or something.
Yeah.
But
Is that with or without the bellows out?
it's kind of funny with the reverse mounting. I don't know how the optics work fully. I just rack it out till it's in focus. But usually, I think for the 50, I was pulling it about. It says it on the side. I can measure it. It was about 20-ish millimeters, about that much extension, and I was able to focus on an object maybe 2 inches away. I was actually focusing on a wrapped 120 film pack, and just the text on it, the Ektar 100 whatever, filled the entire viewfinder. It was really impressive.
What you want to look for is a extension tube set, and if you use a short extension tube, you can mount basically any lens ever made to that camera because your focusing is in the bellows assembly. So you simply figure out a way to attach any lens to the shortest extension tube you can find, which I think is 12.5 millimeters. I mean, I've seen them duct taped on. I've seen people 3D print adapters to mount them. You can put a view camera lens. You can put basically any lens you want on it. It doesn't have to have a helicoid because you've got the helicoid built into the lens itself or into the body, as well as a focal plane shutter.
Now you want to make me put one of my brass Hermegus lens on them.
Yeah, you could do that. I mean, it's easy. It's easy to mount almost anything onto a Rolly SL66.
No, it absolutely is. I actually, when I was first testing the body, I 3D printed an adapter for a Copal 1 shutter and put a 150 millimeter Schneider that I had for my 4x5 on it. And that's how I shot my first roll to test the body and the shutter. I have my eyes out for my chance to grab an Aero Ektar. That I'd love to see, like the 178 millimeter, the F251. I think it'd go very nicely on this body.
I'm happy to let everyone know that our cruise ship is equipped with a 3D printer. So while we're stranded, we can create stuff. So I think that'll be a necessity.
We have to make our own solar panels, though, out of coconut shells.
Yeah, I know. That's the professor will do that. Well, that's cool. That's one camera I have never even so much as held in my hands. So I'm glad, Andrew, you'll have one there on the island with us so that maybe I get a chance to play with it too.
I know. I feel very lucky that I was able to grab it.
If it ever shows up missing, the first tent we're gonna have to check will be Anthony's, though. So he may be hoarding it.
So it seems.
All right, that's a good one. That is an unexpected one. Paul.
What? Wait! Oh, you woke me up.
Yeah. He was.
I'm going to go for the Horseman.
Another Horseman.
Yep, I'm going for the convertible, and I have it. As you'll notice here, since I am such a terrible estimator of distance, I have my accometer on it so I can measure the distance correctly. And I have my 28 millimeter TT Artisan viewfinder.
Is that 2 horsemen or 3 horsemen so far?
This
We
is
got to
3.
4 and things are going really poorly on this
number
cruise.
3, I think.
If you have another one, you might have an apocalypse on your hands.
This is the Horseman convertible, which we've talked about this before. They were going to make this a modular system with 3 different lenses, and it didn't work. So they only actually ever produced the camera with a 62 millimeter lens. And I never could quite figure it out because, I mean, if you had a 127 or a 150 or something like that, there is no rangefinder. So focusing would have been problematic with a telephoto of any kind. With a wide angle, it's not quite so bad. It's if you're at f/22 and focused at 10 feet, you're in focus from 4 feet to infinity.
Don't forget, you've got a big wire loop you just pull up from up front.
Yeah, and it is 6x9, which is cool too. I mean, everybody knows I'm a 6x9 freak.
Is that a graph lock back?
No, it's a horseman back. It will not take. It only takes a horseman back, unfortunately. But I have a ground glass back for it as well.
Did they make backs for in 6.8 or 6.7?
6.7, they did make. They made a back. So yeah, 6.7 and 6.9. No 6.6s.
Okay.
Yeah, I have two of the 6.7 backs.
This one, the back I had for it worked rather rough. So when the last episode we were talking about horsemen, while we were talking, I found one on Robert's Used Photo Pro website, and so I ordered it while we were talking, and it's like new.
Well, I'm glad that camera has adhered itself to you, because there have been so many other, like we've discussed ad nauseum, that Hasselblad SWC that Paul and I both just we couldn't get into. And I was starting to wonder if Paul was never going to find the wide angle medium format camera for him, but it seems like he has. A match made in heaven.
I also got another G617. So Anthony and I now each own G617s.
You'll sell it to somebody soon, I'm sure.
I'm taking it to the camera show.
Maybe it'll be me then. No, that won't. Awesome. Yes, camera show. We got to talk about it. Cincinnati, Ohio. Actually, Westchester, Ohio. Saturday, March 22nd. Anthony's already got his airplane tickets. I'll be there. Paul will be there. We're still uncertain about Dan Tamarkin, but Ray will be there. We'll try to get as many people to stop in and just say hi to us while we're there. So
still holding out for Theo.
Yeah. Where's Theo at now? In Bangkok?
Yeah, he's in Bangkok right now.
Yeah, he's traveling Theo, man. He's in Vietnam. He's in everywhere. It's like he needs to come visit us, because I sure as hell can't afford to fly to Australia. All right. Okay. So, Will, did you get to go first yet? No, you haven't.
No. Let's see. So I did spend a bunch of time a number of years ago in Volcano National Park, and I carried around a Pentax 6.7. So, and a tripod and all the accessories. So speaking of weight and a tool to use to build a shelter. So this time I decided to go the other way and fill my pockets with little cameras. But I think this is the first one. It's a Balda Ragona. Obviously, I'm assuming we have a 127 film
127
on the boat.
That's a very cute camera.
It's really gorgeous. It has a, I don't know what's that, a Schneider Radionar lens, I think. It goes to 175th for shutter speed, but it folds up and it's almost just nothing. But the images out of it are fantastic. They're like tack sharp. It's really impressive. I think it's a vertical, not 645, but the 127
3x4.
Yeah,
3x4.
So
when you first held it up, I thought it was the Zeka Goldie. It kind of looks like that too. That's a very similar camera to that right there. So what's it called again? The Balda what?
It's the Balda Ragona.
Ragona.
Yeah, I found it like in a thrift store for like $15 or something like that, and it was all folded up and tiny. And I was like, that's got to be amazing.
Yeah.
Ira, what's your take on 127?
I got 2 shelves full of 127.
I love 127. I mean, it's always been one of my favorite formats. I don't know why. 127 square. I just love it. I wish there was more cameras that took it.
I've got the original Precaro, the original Voigtlander Precaro 127. It's also tiny.
What was the one you said, Anthony, that you had?
The Voigtlander Precaro.
Okay.
Very sort of Art Deco inspired, but kind of swoopy, but also just fits in the palm of your hand.
Or
no, this is 3x4 also.
3x4. Yeah.
So you got one from the Kurt collection. This one has the Heliar, which I think it's unnecessary because the format's so small. The other one's a Scopar. I've shot the other. I've seen you've shot yours too, right, Anthony?
Yeah, I've shot it. It works great.
I don't think you'll see differences in quality between the Heliar and the Scopar at that size, but that's a really terrific 127 camera to look for. Ihagee, the maker of the Exacta, has a series of cameras called the Parvola. If you could find these are really nice too. Oh, there you go. Paul's got the pocket camera. Kurt had a box of 12 of those.
What's a pocket camera?
It is a plastic, fantastic VP twin pocket camera made by It's a bloomed Bulco lens. Kurt bought a dozen of these things, and they when I got them, they were shrink wrapped. So I mean, they were completely all 12 of them were shrink wrapped in one.
It was a case. I remember the box.
This is the focusing or the rangefinder viewfinder. I don't want to spoil anybody's surprises, but I sent. There's a smash hit podcast that originates out of the West Coast. A smash hit. I mean, it's everybody says it's a smash hit. I made a shipment out to them today, or it's actually going out tomorrow, and I sent them each one of these cameras.
You should have taken pictures of our faces and like scotch taped it to the box. You know, so they could think of us whenever they see it.
Were all of Kurt's cameras the same color?
Yeah, they're all black. They're cheap. They're made in England. They say they're made in England, which really sort of surprises me. I was thinking maybe Korea or Taiwan or somewhere, but they're a cool little camera. I mean, it's nothing special.
There was a manufacturer in England called Kennedy Instruments that made like all the cameras for Ilford. They made a lot of stuff like that. I'm not saying that's who made it, but there were a lot of these companies you would not recognize the names of that was producing stuff like that over there.
Did you shoot that one, Paul?
No, I don't take as many pictures as I should, but the instructions are really good. I mean, it's don't do this, do this. You have to have a coin in order to open the back. So if you don't have a coin, you're shot. Don't move the camera when snapping.
Yeah, right. That's a good tip.
Don't hold your hand in front of the lens aperture. Don't turn the winding knob too quickly, and don't force the winding knob in the wrong direction. Seems pretty straightforward.
Pretty easy.
Ira, were you trying to say something?
I got the VP twin, but I got it in baby blue.
Oh, that's cool. I bet that would be neat.
Which not too often seen.
No.
I always have it in my Christmas picture.
Will, 2 other 127 cameras to look out for, not on our cruise, of course, but the KW Pilot. This is a really cool camera. It's a TLR with collapsible bellows. It does 3x4 on 127, with a waist level finder.
That's really nice.
It's got the little waist finder. And then since you mentioned Square, my all-time favorite Square 4x4 camera is none other than the Perma Special. So we've talked about that before, but definitely get a Perma Special. Cool camera. All right. 127 is covered for when we need to shoot smaller than 120, but bigger than 35. All right. I think I got to do my first one. I was sort of thinking of Theo, although not what you'd think. I wanted to have one medium format. So my one medium format that I'm going to take is a Mamiya, but it is not the 7, but it is the 6. I'm taking one of these Mamiya 6s. This one right here has the Koki Segor lens on it. This one's in pristine shape. The viewfinder is crystal clear. Rangefinder's accurate on it. The focal plane is good. The struts are good. The bellows are good. I actually have not shot this camera before, but I am quite confident it's going to produce quality images. And it's not quite as small as the Perkio, the Fotelander Perkio 2 and folded shut, but it does have a rangefinder, so it's a little bit bigger. I have the Fujica 6 and I have one called the Mine 6, and those are significantly bigger than this. So I think that these folding Mamiya 6s have that kind of right balance of rugged durability, but they're not quite as huge as some of the later medium format rangefinders of that era. So I'll have a nice square format 120 camera while I'm playing with Andrew's Rolleiflex.
Mike, is that the one that has the frame insert in the back? The Mamiya has a mask or something?
Yes, you need that mask to even use it.
Got it.
So when you open it up, you should see this thing here.
Yeah.
And it slides out. I don't want to force it because, there's a little thing holding it in place. But if you ever, let's say you're looking for a Mamiya 6 on eBay or something, make sure you try to find a picture of the film compartment open. Yeah. Oh, see, this one's hinged. Some of them slide out. So this one's hinged, which is probably why I like this one. Because the one I reviewed was a loaner from somebody else. So that's why I don't have the experience with this one. Because I borrowed one and loved it so much. I wanted to get another Mamiya 6. I found a few of them, but they weren't in the best of shape. So I was holding out for ones that were in really fantastic shape. So I have this one right here for that purpose.
Mike, on the inside back of yours, what's the what's the situation around the windows? Has it got a big piece of felt or?
You mean in the door?
Yeah.
No, there's no felt at all.
So is it just rubber?
No, it's black crinkle paint.
Okay, all right. I have the same camera. Mine has somebody has added
Someone added that.
Yeah, and this one on the top one there isn't anything, so I got a feeling that's going to be completely. It's going to be a complete light leak up there.
Does yours have a door on the back that can close?
Yes, 2 doors.
It does. Okay.
I have 2 doors on mine.
My guess is some previous owner did that. I don't think that's original. They probably were having a light leak and added it maybe.
This is interesting though, because mine has 2 doors. Wouldn't that imply it would do 6x6 and 645 both?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, yours has 1 door. Yours has one slider.
Mine is 2. Well, I have 1 slider, but I have 2 doors.
Okay. See, I have 2 sliders.
Yeah, I have 1 slider, but in here there's a little thing.
Uh-huh.
I can go back and forth between the 2. So I change it inside the film compartment, not from the outside.
Okay, and you have the pressure plate mask.
Correct. Yes, because that thing, Will, you were talking about, that's the pressure plate.
Yeah.
That's why you need to have it. So on this one, this is the 5. I think it's the Mamiya 6K5. God, I can't remember. I'll have to correct. I'll edit myself saying it the right way later. But some of the earlier ones, in fact, most of the earlier ones, that thing just slides out. So if you're ever looking to buy one of these on eBay, look for a film compartment shot. And if you don't see that part there, don't buy it.
Yeah, I looked for those a number of years ago and knew that about them, and then drifted off into other things. But yeah, that's really cool. Nice.
Another camera that's like that too is the Kanishi Roku, the Konica, the Perlette, which is a little folding. It's also 127. It has a removable back too that is also the pressure plate. So without it, your film will just flop around and nothing will be in focus. All right. Well, that's my first one. So we've gotten everybody's round 1.
Hey, you should let Stephen go.
Oh, that's right. He hasn't gone yet. I'm sorry, Stephen.
Yeah, no worries.
He's too busy cooking. No, go ahead, Stephen.
Well, when this whole thing came up, the idea of, do you just take a camera you want to use, or do you take something that is super reliable? Is the first thing I thought of. And there's actually a major overlap for those, that there are cameras that are very reliable and that I would very much want to use. And that would be a compact 1970s SLR that's just mechanical, manual, metal. And so something like an Olympus OM1, a Pentax MX, a Nikon FM or FM2, that would be small and light, and it would be reliable, and you could take a couple of lenses with you that would fit in various pockets, and it would be, I think, a pretty easy thing to carry around, give you good results, be very predictable with having an SLR viewfinder. So that's kind of the way I'd go. And if it really were a desert island, I think the FM2 might win out, just because of the faster shutter speed with 1/4000th. If you've got that desert sun beating down, that tropical sun, that would make things a lot easier. So you're able to shoot wide open and not carry ND filters with you. It's just the wine lever switch for the meter drives me nuts on that camera. So I might have to go with something else, but I think for a true desert island, that would be my pick.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say anything bad about the FM2. It's a great camera. I mean, that's it. It's great.
Yeah, they're just reliable. They're so well made and so simple. And a lot of people love the FM3A and the FE. I just don't think they're quite as reliable.
No, they're not. I actually found, or I'd read about, I had the problem myself, and then that caused me to research it and read about it. But a somewhat common fault of the FEs, just the original ones, I don't think the FE2 do this, but the battery compartment, the plate on the bottom of the camera has the door on it, right? And you put the battery in there, and it sits in a piece of plastic that's part of the body of the camera, but the battery compartment is plastic. And if the camera takes a hit just the right way, the actual battery compartment will crack off inside the camera, and it breaks away just enough that it loses electrical contact. And there's really no way to fix it, because it's like part of the mirror box almost. And like I said, I had an FE, and I could never get it to power up. And the contacts were clean. I had fresh batteries. I knew I was putting in correctly. Well, then when I actually looked at it under bright enough light, I saw a circular crack around the entire perimeter of the inside of the battery compartment. And when I poked at it with like a tiny screwdriver, the entire battery compartment was loose inside the camera. So I dug up on some old photo.net posts or something from the early 2000s where people were talking about that. Yeah, that started to become kind of a part of that. Was probably one of the areas that Nikon maybe did some cost cutting on those cameras, which they later fixed. But that's something to look out for if you're looking for an FE. I can't remember if the original FM was the same way, but I'm sure it's definitely the FE. But the FM2s I think they corrected any shortcomings of those earlier cameras.
It was the first SLR that I bought when I was a freshman in college and took my first photography class, and it was one of the first FM2s sold through B&H. Like they just literally got them in inventory, and I bought one. And so that camera had followed me around the world for decades. And when I worked in the scuba industry, in the dive exploration industry, that was the camera that I took on every single boat that I ever went out on. So it's been to grease the dive on the wreck of the Britannic, which is the sister ship to the Titanic. It had been, cave systems around the world. So it literally was my desert island camera that lived in my dive bag and was just as bulletproof as you could imagine. And even later, like when I went to go up into Canada in the middle of winter up to Quebec, and I asked around about, which camera should I take up to Quebec because I'm going to be shooting outside, and it was like, 10 below, and general consensus, take your FM2, and I never missed a shot. That camera is like an expedition camera. Just to me, it's like the perfect expedition camera.
Yeah, that whole era of SLRs was kind of the peak of quality and metal and good quality construction, but in a small size. And shortly after that, it was the introduction of plastic, and everything kind of went downhill in terms of reliability after that.
If the FM2 was not currently available, would you still go with an MX? Would that have been your next choice from that? I guess the MX is a little bit older, but
yeah, the MX is a great camera. I find that they're very reliable. I love that you've got aperture and shutter readouts in the viewfinder, which is really nice. I actually find that just a tiny bit too small, though. It's interesting. It's, I think, the shortest camera of that bunch, and it's just a tiny, teensy weensy bit too small to be perfectly comfortable in my hands. I'm not sure why it makes such a difference.
That's another one that's a favorite of mine. It's the camera that over the last decade that I was most likely to put in my backpack when I'd head down to Central and South America to go tramping around on coffee farms, because I wanted that small camera. I mean, you got to remember that my other camera that I would have taken would have been a Minox 35 GTE. So the MX actually felt like a Pentax 6.7 to me. But yeah, I love that. I love the MX. It's another camera that I highly, highly endorse.
if you find the MX to be too small, a tip could be get the motor drive. The motor drive includes a handle, like a finger grip. So it attaches at the bottom. I have it here somewhere. I don't know where it is, but when you slide it on, there's a secondary shutter release that moves forward, and you get a little bit of a hand grip, kind of giving a little bit better grip on that camera.
It's definitely one of the more ergonomic motor drives as well. All of the little scallops in the handle for your fingers to fit in is really nice compared to a lot that were just a very smooth cylinder to hold on to. I think Pentax had some really nice ergonomics around that time.
I had a similar problem. I just got a Pentax MZS a couple of weeks ago.
That's a nice camera.
It's too small for my hands. It's weird. I had two fingers hanging off the bottom of it.
Well, I'm going to call it an MZS because I'm Canadian, but the battery grip for that camera is absolutely a perfect solution because not only does it add the height to the camera, it's one of very few battery grips. The Minolta Maxim 7 is another one that comes to mind. It's where they place the shutter release for the grip for when you're holding the camera vertically, not at the very edge of the grip, but inset further down. So normally when you get a vertical grip on a camera, that vertical grip is putting your shutter release finger significantly higher away from the lens than it is when you're holding the camera horizontally. But Pentax, with that grip, they did a little cutout for that shutter release so that you basically have the same sort of finger positioning in horizontal and in vertical. And I think it's just an ergonomic masterpiece for that.
You know, it's interesting because, again, I had a Maxim. I use a Maxim 9, which is a big, chunky camera, but it fits my hand perfectly. I was actually thinking of getting the motor drive for the MZS because the other one just felt too tiny.
Yeah, I really highly recommend it. I think it's one of the most ergonomic cameras. When you put that grip on it, it's just fantastic.
I don't usually get accessories for cameras, but I may make an exception on that one.
The one thing with that MZ, MZ, ZX line, ZX line is they had very weak plastic gears for the motors. So a lot of them end up just firing and then the mirror sticks up and the gear that drives it back down has broken. They did at some point start replacing them with brass gears. And I don't know if you can really tell by serial number. It depends on the model. But if that should ever happen to your camera, you can get replacement brass gears to install inside it. It's kind of a pain. You've got to really strip the camera down, but it's a common fault of those to watch out for, and it can be fixed.
That's a cool camera. That's been on my radar for a while. I never find one cheap enough because they are one of the more expensive K-mount Pentaxes out there.
Yeah, but the nice thing about it is the whole top deck is tilted towards the user.
It is, yeah. It's got a very
flat. And that is unique. I've never seen
Yeah.
another camera like that.
Yeah, it does have a different, distinct look to it.
It's also got the weirdest exposure compensation and bracketing dial. It's kind of complex, but it actually makes so much sense that you've got a dial on the left that is exposure compensation. And then there's an inner part of the dial that has bracketing, and it's two different spacings. I forget exactly what it is, half stop and one stop. But you can turn the inner dial one way or the other to enable bracketing, and then combine that with exposure compensation. And so you could have your exposure compensation be perfect exposure, one stop over, one stop under, or if you align the exposure compensation dial, there are little arrows that will point you to what you're getting, which could be 2 stops under, 1 stop under, and no stops under. That it's a very visual way of seeing exactly how you can combine bracketing and exposure compensation that I thought was pretty clever.
You had mentioned the MX, and then Stephen, you made the comment of, do I go for durability, reliability, or do I go with what I want to shoot? So logically, durability would be the better choice, and the MX was on my list initially. But shortly before we started recording, I said, you know what? No, I'm going to go with one that's going to make me happy while shooting for as long as I can get it to work. And I upgraded to the Pentax LX. You were just talking about the finger grips, the scalloped edges to it. It's hard to see in the picture here, but it's so comfortable. Azahi was thinking ahead of the game here on what was comfortable for hand grips. This is still at the time when Canon was putting like the tiny little bump, for the AE1 and the A1. I mean, this is a proper grip. I mean, I could hold the camera and I could flail my hand around, and I have a very, very tight grip on this camera. The LX is slightly larger than the MX, so it kind of has a little bit more beefiness to it. Sadly, they have not proven to be the most reliable cameras over time. They do start to develop electrical gremlins, and when they do fail, there's few, if any, people willing to fix them anymore. I am just fortunate that I have one that works perfectly, but it does have one feature that, while not very practical, I still think is super cool that I don't know that any other camera has, and that the film transport is geared in such a way where if I shoot and I'm on the 10th exposure, and for whatever reason, I want to go back 3 exposures and double expose over 3 previous shots, you can actually rewind the film and the exposure counter will go with you. And it'll tell you which exposure you're at while you're rewinding. So if I was on the 10th exposure and I want to reshoot the 7th exposure, I can actually rewind it. And as long as I get the counter to number 7, I will be on the 7th exposure, exactly perfectly lined up. It won't overlap any other images. And then I can just forward back ahead to 11 and just keep going. So again, I know that's kind of weird. I don't know how often anybody would do that. But if you're a huge fan of double exposures, the LX does have kind of a feature that I don't know that there's many other cameras that do that, where when you're rewinding the film, you see the exposure counter going backwards with you, forwards and backwards, whatever direction you're going. And I just think that's kind of cool. But it's a pretty camera. I like the way it feels. I don't have it, but if you look on the side here, there's 2 additional posts. They actually did make for left-handed people with a shutter release on this side too. You could get a separate handle. They also made neck straps. Like the Leica M5 has the 2 loops on the same side. You can actually get a neck strap where you could carry your camera from the side instead of the traditional way up and down too. So they were definitely thinking of some cool features to sort of differentiate themselves from the masses. And I think a lot of us are big fans of the Asahi Pentaxes. This was really their only attempt at a pro camera. I mean, you could swap the viewfinders on it too. I just wish that Pentax had continued in this line. It would have been cool to see what an LX2 might have been able to do. Let's go back to Robin. Robin, are you going to bring anything other than your horseman?
The obligatory.
Oh, the brick. Yes, thank you.
No.
I brought a brick last time. I didn't want to do it again, but I'm glad you are.
It's a fun little mechanical camera. I'm not very big into rangefinders. I find them difficult to focus, at least for me. So the Argos is just something I picked up. This is probably the first camera I ever collected. Found it in Chicago when I was at Great Lakes Naval Station.
And yours is a Matchmatic. You have the black and tan Matchmatic. I can see there. No, I mean, I can see, Robin, you wear prescription eyeglasses, as do I. And one thing that I really like about the Argus brick is that the rangefinder is of the split window type. It's not the coincident image where it's two images on top of one another. The coincident image rangefinders are very convenient in a lot of instances. They require a beam splitter to work. A beam splitter is a semi-silvered mirror in which a portion of the light passes through it and then another portion is reflected to the other window. So by their very design, whenever you're looking through a beam splitter, you were not seeing 100% of the light. So the light is dimmed. Whereas on the Argus or other cameras like that, the original Agfa Carats is another example, where when you have a true split image, those are just bright mirrors. 100% of the light entering both rangefinder mirrors is hitting your eye. On the Argus, don't they tint it? I think one of them might be tinted, which does sort of kind of contradict what I'm saying here.
Bluish.
Right. But I still find it very easy to see. So I'm projecting here, but I can see you wear glasses like I do. I find it much easier to focus that camera than some of the other rangefinders of its era.
I've kind of leaned towards, in the last 10 years or so, zone focusing cameras. I've gotten really good at guesstimating distances. So that's why I like the little Zeiss Iconta, I think, so much, is because as long as I can get most of the image in the viewfinder and correctly guess the distance, I know I'm going to get a decently sharp image.
When we get to the island, maybe we could put on a workshop and you could help Paul, because he notoriously is not good at guess focus. So he could. Good choice. I've talked about it over and over again. And I'll give you one more tip in case you haven't heard me say it before. Get the Sandmar 35mm lens if you could find it for the Argus C3. It's a German lens. I mean, I think the Centaur lens is quite good, but it's made by Enna. The Enna Sandmar lens for the Argus C3. Make sure you get a viewfinder. And the nice thing about you having the Matchmatic is you have an accessory shoe on there.
Yeah, it's nice.
The earlier bricks did not have an accessory shoe. You had to get a clip-on meter, which worked fine, but it's just not standard. But with your camera, you could just go on eBay and get any 3D printed 35mm viewfinder and clip it on there if you don't already have one. But the EnnaWorks Sandmar 35mm lens is very good for the Argus C3.
Cool. Yeah, the hardest thing for me is getting used to the left-hand film advance.
Yeah,
I always want to turn
true.
it the opposite direction.
All right, let's go back to Andrew. Andrew, what's next?
I'm sure he'll want to talk about this too, because this is another odd one. We are both owners of an interesting camera that is it's a 4x5 camera. I can't see. Yeah, you can see clearly. It's called the Vega 4x5, and it is a 3D printed monorail that we both built our own versions of it. And this is what I got my Schneider on right now. And I actually use it the most with the Lomo graph lock back, but it is just dead simple. I ground the glass myself. It's just some acrylic that I sanded, like wet sanded, and all the colorful bits here are just 3D printed pieces of plastic.
Great color.
Where did you get your bellows from?
I made them myself with Joann's fabric, and they are okay.
Wow. Is that an
Yeah.
Angulon?
It's a Simar 150 5.6.
Okay.
I got it from Used Photo Pro. Paul knows what's up. Used Photo Pro is one of my favorite shops.
Yeah, that's Indianapolis. That's right, not too far from me. That's where I got my Detrola from them. I want to have them on the show, actually. They've actually said that they do it. We just got to find the time to do it. Give us a high level. What's involved in making your own bellows from Joann fabric?
So The standard camera is a project website. I don't know, but they have a really great tutorial on bellows making. But what it boils down to is you have 3 layers in your bellows, at least in the format that I followed. You have your light tight inner layer, and then the like stiffener rib layer, and then the outer. It's sort of your cosmetic layer. But so I used the key thing that you want to use is like a nylon, specifically like a ripstop is the best. And I think what ripstop means is it has some thread that's kind of like gridded out to keep rips from propagating. For I this is really DIY. Like kind of I bought a bunch of gray ripstop nylon like that outside, and then cut out my inner layer and used a can of black plasti dip, and basically gave the inner layer a big old polyurethane coating,
That's what I was going to ask. What do you use for
spraying
light
an
type of
entire
plastic?
can of
Okay.
plasti dip on it. And I would not recommend that. It was a lot of work, and I have pinhole central, and I ended up just buying a second can of plasti dip and going over it to fill up almost all the pinholes, but not all of them. And then the ribs, most people use like manila folders. They just cut up the because the tutorial I found, you gave measurements for the actual like rib dimensions, and I used my CAD skills to make just a DXF file, so it's like a 2D vector map. But what I did is I got a little creative. I actually used my 3D printer because I have a fairly large one. I was able to 3D print a 1 layer thick piece of PETG plastic that was the profile of the ribs, and I printed 4 of those and glued those onto my polyurethane coated layer, and then just kind of wrapped a bunch of pretty much all my leftover thin ripstop nylon on it to get it as light tight as possible and fold it up. And they're pretty crunchy. They definitely don't fold up the nicest, but like they get the job done. That's what it
Yeah,
comes down
that's
to.
really,
And
really
I'm waiting
neat.
to go back around too.
That's
But
awesome.
they do it. They have a little bit of light leaks at full extension, but I don't hit full extension often, so certainly gets the job done.
At some point, Andrew, can you email me or DM me an image of your camera?
Yeah, and I'll even if Christopher is struggling with his audio, he should pull his out too because he built his first.
Christopher, did you get it fixed?
I don't know. Did I get it fixed?
You got
Yes.
Oh,
it
you
fixed.
did.
Yes,
Sound
way
great.
better. So, hey, Christopher, we skipped over you. What would be your first camera you'd bring with?
My first choice would be the first gen Canon F1. I had a Nikon F2 for a little bit, and I really enjoyed playing with that. But I came across the opportunity to get the F1, and I'm just a Canon guy, so it replaced it, and it does everything I like, and it makes me so happy to use it. So if I'm trapped on a desert island, it'll make me forget where I am.
There's definitely nothing wrong with the F1. They're great cameras. I mean, honestly, the only reason they weren't more successful is that Nikon, Nippon Kugaku had the pro market like cornered. Like there was nobody competing with them. And Canon came out with that in 71, I believe. And it was great. And people loved it. But the pros didn't want to start over with a new system. So, Canon sort of had to pick and choose new people who didn't already have an established Nikon system, and it even still took them really until the autofocus era before they really started to surpass Nikon. So 71 to when did the EOS 650 come out, Paul? 86, I think.
80s.
86.
Yeah, 80, mid 80s.
Yeah, I think it was 86. So I mean, you figure it took them 15 years even after the F1 came out before they really captured a part of that market. So that's a great camera. All right. Did you get your other 3D printed camera to show us?
It lives in the corner.
Is it the same color?
Andrew's right. He helped me find the original design for this. Somebody shared it on a file sharing website just as, print it yourself. And Andrew taught me about it, but I made one slightly before him. It's the same design, just different colors. I've got my newly acquired Calumet Caltar 2S, my 210 f5.6. I happened across it when I went to go pick up some film the other weekend. It was in the case and it had the lens cap over it, so I couldn't see what it was. And I was like, "What you got there?" And they gave me a good price for it. So
Will do. I want to add really quick. Christopher's bellows, he purchased online. They standard camera sells bellows. It just takes a couple weeks because they make them themselves, but they're way better quality than you can do on your first attempt. I know that all too well.
I still applaud you for trying. That's neat.
That thing, those remind me of the Horseman LX monorail cameras, the L-shaped bracket on it.
All right, who wants to go next?
If you're going to be on a desert island, assuming you're going to be shipwrecked, and if you're going to be shipwrecked, you've got to have a waterproof camera.
I knew it. I knew someone's going to bring an underwater camera. Anthony, we got our first Nikonos. Is that the 4 or the 5?
5.
5. Okay. Yep. Love that camera. Very nice.
This is the ultimate vacation camera.
It is. Yeah. And if you have, I've said this 100,000 times, you have the 3.5, 2.5. That's the exact same lens as the rangefinder lens, and it is optically excellent.
And they are waterproof.
Yes.
Unless you do what my late wife did. I promised to take care of my children. Well, every time we used it, I used to rinse it out under fresh water to get the salt off it. Anyway, I was taking care of the kids, and my wife decided, you know what? I'm going to clean your camera for you. So she opened it up and filled it with water.
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
And 300 and some odd dollars later, it was good as new.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Oh.
Anthony, didn't you say that there's one particular Nikonos that you just cannot get the O-rings for? Is that the 4?
Yeah, it's the 4. It was the one model where instead of using like actual round O-rings, they had custom molded O-rings that are kind of flat and had like they look like a gasket you might find on the header of like an old Chevy small block engine. It's not an O-ring, it's actual gasket. I actually when I picked up a 4 from Paul, and I went through that with a fine tooth comb. I went online and found new old stock gaskets for it, lubed everything up. But of course, these gaskets now are 35 years old. They just had lost their elasticity. And I'm taking pictures, and everything seems to be going fine. And after about 8 frames, I feel some resistance, and I look at the front, and you could just see the water level halfway up the lens.
Oh.
So luckily I was shooting in fresh water, and the camera had worked perfectly fine up to that point.
Yeah.
But once the camera hit about 2/3 of the way full, it stopped working. Plus,
yeah,
it was pretty funky with it was like some sort of custom Lomo filter to have your lens half full of water as you're trying to shoot underwater. But I was actually able to try it out and get the electronics working again. So, with that 35 millimeter that you can shoot on the surface with, it makes a fine sort of weatherproofed camera for shooting on the surface. You just can't dive with it. But other than that, I've got a 2, a 3, and a 5, and I shoot with them all the time. There's manatees behind me. This was just last month with a Nikonos 3. Yeah, I love those cameras.
Yeah, I have the 2 and the 5, and I agree with you. I don't go to the lengths that you do underwater, but I have taken them in like a swimming pool. And the 5, even though it's 35 years old, like you said, as long as you're not going in highly pressurized water, if the gasket feels pliable to your finger, it's probably going to be okay in like a kid's swimming pool or something, or at the beach.
As long as you don't go too deep. But I remember when I got this camera, it came with an extra set of O-rings just in case.
I think you can still get the kits for the 5s. I think you can still buy them.
Yeah, you can get kits for the 1, 2, 3, and 5, just not the 4.
Not the 4. Yeah. Well, there you go. All right. So we've gotten panoramic, we've gotten large format, we've gotten 127, we got underwater. AJ, I'm kind of hoping you get some kind of astrological camera. We could take pictures of the stars. Is there anything in the cards for that or no?
Well, I mean, honestly, it's been a hell of a long time since I've done any film astrophotography. But as far as my general kit, if I go digital, it would be my A6500, which is an APS-C on a 600 millimeter lens.
Well, we're getting solar panels, so I guess we'll be able to charge the batteries.
As long as we can charge the batteries.
All right. Well, since we're talking, what's your next one then?
My next one would probably be my 4x5, which is a Nagaoka field camera. And actually, I'm debating on whether I should bring in glass plate or just a full box of HP5 or FP4 film wise.
I don't have any feedback for you. Sorry.
Glass would be more interesting, so definitely go with all glass.
Oh
Yeah. Now, do you know how to make glass plates? Like I've seen YouTube videos of guys that are like pouring this like pancake syrup on it, and
believe it or not, that's my challenge for this year.
This year? Okay, all right.
I've started doing dry plate just not last year, the year before. And now my big challenge is going to be doing my own wet plate.
Okay. Well, I'm putting on the calendar. Our Christmas 2025 episode is going to be checking in with AJ and
Sounds
see if
good.
he's able to do it.
I'm there.
Ira's got to go. Ira, thanks for coming. Let us know if you get that thing for the MZ5 or MZS.
All righty.
I'm curious to hear what you think about it. Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye, Ira.
All right. I've lost complete track of who's gone twice. So, Steven, I think you've only gone once.
Well, all this talk of Horseman's reminds me that I used to have a Horseman 960, and I actually once used that for an event. I handheld it, used the rangefinder to focus, and on the other side of it, I had a Metz 45 CT4 flash attached to it. And so I, with the roll film back, I can't remember if it was 6x7 or 6x9, shot handheld with that, and that was absolutely one of the craziest, silliest things I've ever done. And I absolutely would not take anything like a VH on a desert island with me. So, Robin, kudos to you for being ambitious. It would be nice to have it on a tripod and do the movements and everything with it. But I would go very much the opposite end of a camera that size and weight, and I'd take an Olympus XA because that would be something very small to just throw in a pocket. It's got an integrated dust barrier, that sliding cover that covers up the lens and the viewfinder. And it has a pretty nice auto exposure system that will do a very long 10-second exposure if it needs to in very low light. So as sun was setting, just set it down on a rock, no tripods, nothing fancy and heavy to carry around with you, and let it run some really long exposures and see what that could produce if you're hiking up to the top of a mountain with it to get a better view of your surroundings.
Can't argue with a Maitani camera.
So, Mike, we're kind of on a roll here, so I'm going to go ahead and give my second camera,
Go for it.
which is going to be the Voigtlander Bergheil, which was a pre-war Voigtlander that was sort of their mountaineering hiking camera. Very tiny folding camera. It was the preferred camera of the photographer Brassai, who did the famous Paris at Night series. I actually have a roll-up adapter so it can shoot 6x9, and but you focus on the ground glass. You put your 6x9 back on it. You take your exposure. Sort of like a combination of the convenience of a roll film camera with the the precision of a plate camera. But I'd have all the time in the world on the desert island to really try to master this tiny little camera that, when it's folded up, is about the size of a paperback book. And then you put it on a tripod, and suddenly it has like a 12-ounce extension on it, and so you can focus down to like maybe 4 inches with it. And mine's got the Heliar lens, so it's very much the same sort of setup that Brassai used. So I know that I know the quality of what it can produce, but it's a camera that it's a 100-year-old camera, and it makes you really slow down and think about what you're doing. And it's so small, it's so convenient to it's sort of like small large format or medium large format.
That's a good way of putting it. On the Retina episode, David Jentz talked about the Ricomar, which is very similar. I don't know if you ever had a chance to play with one of those before. They made them in 2 different sizes. Very cool.
Did you get a Recamar from Kurt?
No, I had one from before that. I have a Ricomar 18.
I think I got 2 of them from Kurt.
Oh, did you?
Still have one of them. I'm not sure which one it is, but
They came in 2 sizes. There's the 18, and I think the 33 is the other one.
yes, I think I have a 33.
Okay.
Well, since we're all taking cameras, I figure we need something to carry the cameras in.
Ooh, a bag.
So I'm going to choose the most useless camera bag ever made. One I don't mind leaving on a desert island somewhere, or even throwing it off the boat, off the minnow when we get close to shore. This is a bag that was sold by Leica, but made by Lights, New Jersey, and they say Rockley, New Jersey on them. It's the most useless bag ever made. It's a messenger style bag. It has absolutely no padding.
I mean, it just looks like a canvas bag.
Yeah, it is a canvas bag, and it's got one flap on the inside that does nothing.
You're probably supposed to use that bag to carry your purchase out of the Leica store while walking down State Street. That's probably what it's for.
All these companies, Fogg, Bellingham, Arts and Artisans, there's a jillion $500 camera bags out there. And so this bag, for some reason, when I buy, I bet I have 10 of these in the basement right now. People bought them. but I don't know that anyone ever used them. This guy used them because he put his name on the inside flap, and it's really nasty. So I'm pretty sure he did use it, but he's the only guy I know that's ever used one of them. So that's what I would take to carry my cameras in. But since we're here, I'm going to jump also.
Interesting choice.
Here's my Canon G10. Since we're going to possibly
have electricity,
we'll have electricity since we got a generator. I'm going to take my Canon G10, which is just a wonderful little 14 megapixel 3x 5x zoom lens. It's just a cool little high quality point and shoot digital camera.
Did G series, Stephen, tell me if I'm wrong, but was one of the last series of cameras, digital cameras, to have an optical viewfinder?
Yeah, I believe it was.
I remember my first digital camera was made by Toshiba, and it had an optical viewfinder, and that was just normal back then. But it seems like an oddity today.
Yeah, it was great for saving battery power, and I really miss that.
Yeah,
most cameras these days don't have them.
You know, I didn't even notice it that it has an optical viewfinder because I'm just in such a habit of looking at the screen. But you're right, it's coupled to the zoom, and it does give you inside the viewfinder. You do get a focus confirmation is on a green light beside your viewfinder.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it actually works quite well.
And those had above average sensors too. So the image quality is quite good on those. The Canon G series was not, what do they sell that as, like a prosumer kind of level? It wasn't high end, but it wasn't the entry level.
Yeah, at one point, those were around the same cost that you pay for a DSLR. That when the Canon Rebels came out, the earlier G series at that time, you'd pay about the same price for them. So they were definitely a premium digital camera.
Okay.
Yeah, the S series and the A series were the cheaper ones. The A's were the low cost, and the S's were second, and then the G series were the top of the lines.
Hey, Paul, does that bag have my name in it? Because this is my everyday carry.
It's similar. It is very similar.
It's an old Army ammo bag.
Okay, it's not the same. Well, Robin just held up he just said an Army bag, but through the Zoom call, it looked pretty darn close to the same thing. That would have been funny, though, if Robin's like, but Paul, I love those bags. I'm never listening to your stupid show again. All right, Anthony, I know you just went with your second. Do you want to go for your third in case you're running out of steam?
Yeah, I'm going to have to cut out, unfortunately. You know, my third, it's a camera that I've talked about recently. And because of that, I took it out and shot at the state fair with it last week. And that's the Zeiss 10X2, which is just such a cool camera. You know, I'm a sucker for the Zeiss Super Icontas. And, you know, I was thinking about the Super Iconta 6x9 as being a top choice. But at the end of the day, the 10X2 is such a modern antique camera. I mean, if you handle that camera, you would think it was made in the 1950s or 60s. You know, it just has so many cool features, and it's so well thought out, and it's so well engineered, and it's a square frame camera. I wasn't thinking about that when I put a roll of 36 in and ended up shooting, I think, 50.
Yeah.
Like, when is this thing ever going to end? But I'm lucky in that I've got a copy that has the sonar lens. It's the 40 millimeter sonar. So it's got a fantastic lens. It's compact. It's because I like a small camera. Plus, it's as an object and as an aesthetic object. You know, it's like having a little art sculpture with you as well, like a little, you know, mid-century modern Bauhaus sculpture that you carry around your neck that also happens to be a camera. So it gives you joy because it's a cool object, and yet it also takes a fantastic photo and it's fun to use. So yep, 10X2, that's my vote. Not the easiest camera to find, not the cheapest camera to find, but certainly a camera that if I were stuck with one camera, it's the one that I'd want to carry around my neck.
So I think you just answered my follow-up question then. 10X2 head-to-head with the Robot Royal. Still sticking with the 10X?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the Royal's a tank, you know, the Royal is so well made, and it's kind of like an M3 analog, but the 10X is just such an unusual, it's not like any other camera that I own. You know, in a way, it's kind of like is it the Konica 3 that has the plunger on the side of the lens?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, in a way, the Konica 3 lifts that from the 10X2, and in a way, the Wera, with the way that it has the controls around the lens, borrows from the 10X, but the 10X does it, and it executes it in such a satisfying way. It's just such a cool camera to shoot.
If anyone really likes that Konica 3 10X style shutter, on the side. There was another Japanese camera called the Zenobia 35 that had the exact same type of shutter release system on the side. So that's another one to look out for, but they're not as common though.
In a way, the Penty half frame cameras and the Vitessa with its combi plunger are like variations of that, although not quite as elegantly
No.
incorporated as the 10X.
The Penties, that because it shoots out the side, it
Yeah.
depending on how you're holding it, it'll just slam into your hand. Although I did find out though, it when that happens, you're not holding the shutter open, thankfully. So it doesn't actually ruin your exposure. It's just annoying. All right. Well, Christopher, we skipped you for your first one. So I think let's go back to you with number 2. What's another one you're gonna bring?
The Canon F1 was my easy answer, and I've been thinking about it this whole time. I think my number 2, I'm going to go with the Olympus 35 RC.
Ooh.
It's no XA, but it's such a cute little handheld, and it's with a battery. You can have the option to let it be in its automatic mode, where it'll select the aperture for you based off of what your shutter speed is set at, or you can use it fully mechanically. So I can play with it while it's got batteries, but if it eventually runs out, I can still use it, and it's full frame.
I am almost positive he literally just signed up, but that's one of Anthony's favorite cameras. He's talked about that one before, the 35 RC. Those are very nice.
Right on.
A lot of those, they're not mini. I mean, they're still full-size cameras. They're just in a smaller, more compact body. But that era of Olympus rangefinders was really, really good. I feel like Stephen came off mute because he wants to, right? What do you think of the RC?
The RC is one of the smallest, if not the smallest, metal manual, works fully without batteries, rangefinders of that era. It's a really special camera for sure.
Good choice. All right, well, I guess I'll go for 3. Since we're talking about compact rangefinders, it's not quite as small as the Olympus 35 RC, but since Paul mentioned the L word, no one's brought a Leica with. So I kind of thought a camera that I think I would really like on a desert island would be the Leica CL. Also, there was a Minolta version of this camera too. It's got the metal feel to it. I mean, I'm sure there's some plastic in here, but it does have a very high quality feel to it. It uses the Leica M mount. The viewfinder is very large and bright. I'd say comparable to a typical M series viewfinder, rangefinder combination. It's got a match needle, which is really nice. I'm actually working on a review currently for the Leica M5. And one of the things I said in that review was it's the only Leica rangefinder with a match needle. And that's not true because this has that too. But the M5 is the only M series rangefinder with a match needle. But the Leica CL, it's an attractive camera. It's reasonably well built. But my favorite feature is the standard Summicron 40 millimeter lens. In all of the cameras and lenses and focal lengths that I've shot, I found that each person is different. Everybody's eyes are slightly different. The way everybody perceives the world around them is slightly different. So different focal lengths are how your brain sees the world. And I've learned about myself that 40 millimeter is the focal length that my eyes see the world. I've always said this. It doesn't matter whether you're talking a rangefinder, an SLR, whatever. When I have a 50 millimeter lens, my instinct of where I want to stand to take that picture, I'm always too close. I always feel like anytime I have a 50 millimeter lens, I'm constantly having to back up just a little bit, not a lot, but it just my instinct of where I need to be before I make the image. I'm always wrong when I'm on a 50, but give me a 45 millimeter or even a 35. There's not a huge difference between 30 and 40, 35 and 40. But whenever I have a 40 millimeter, it's like the Canonet, the QL17 has a 40 millimeter. I love, even though this camera isn't very reliable, I love the Konica, the 40 f1.8 lens. It's kind of like a pancake lens. You could put this lens on any AR mount Konica. I just happen to have it on the FT1. But this lens is really amazing. We were talking on the Discord about Pentax 40 millimeter lenses. They had the K-mount 2.8 40 millimeter, which is a fantastic lens as well. It's also very small. But I just really, really, really like the 40 millimeter focal range. And I think that if I have to limit my collection to 3 cameras and I want one that I could just walk around, compact, high quality images, it's going to give me joy, I think the Leica CL would be my third choice.
Hey, Mike, you just got to put that old Olympus 4 centimeter f2.8 Leica thread mount lens, adapt that to the Leica CL, and then
That's
I'll be
true.
right
You're
with
right.
you.
I have that too. I have the Leica thread mount Olympus lens. Again, another example. What I was just saying. I'm just drawn to that focal length. 40 millimeter is it for me. The Rollei 35 rangefinder is an M mount also, and it would have originally come with a 40 millimeter lens. So it has the projected frame lines in the viewfinder. Instead of 35, it has a 40, which I think is pretty cool too. Who wants to go next?
I'll go for
All right, Will.
wrap up 2 and 3. So I think the second one I had was a 35. I think it's the Konica one.
Konica one. Yep.
And it's I haven't used a lot of rangefinders, but this camera is just great.
They're
And
very
when
nice.
that's the lens, you can almost throw it in your jacket pocket, but it's got enough heft and it's really, really sharp.
Is that a Hexar 2.8 or a 3.5?
2.8.
So you got the better lens.
Yeah.
Does it say on the back or the bottom made in occupied Japan, or does it just say Japan?
This one is made in Japan.
In Japan. Okay, so you have a later one then.
Yeah.
Doesn't make a difference, but some people, for collectible, they like the occupied Japan ones.
And it's so clear and bright. I mean, that's what really impressed me it was kind of one of the first rangefinders that I started using, and just sharp it is in there and the focus.
What's interesting about that camera is, now I'm going to make a superlative that people won't agree with, but Konica, that was their first 35 millimeter camera. In my opinion, they are the only Japanese company that got it 100% right out the door, the first try. Like even Nikon, like the Nikon 1, they only made 700 of them, and they had to send it back to change the size. They had to keep tweaking it to make it right. But those Konica ones are very, very good. And in your comment about being surprised at how bright the viewfinder was, I mean, that's a camera designed in the 40s. Yeah. Yours is, because it's a later one, yours is probably 52, 53. But if you get in good condition one of the original Konica ones, you can tell the first version, the plate around the lens is black. All the others are chrome. But if you can find even the original ones, the viewfinder is still very, very good. And they just did a really good job on their first try.
Yeah, no, yeah, I really like using it. And then my other one, just I'll throw in the last one, of course, has to be this amazing Minolta 24 Rapid. Now that you mentioned we have a 3D printer on board. I did find this little flash, which is not the one that went with this. But it's kind of from the same time period, and added the ring, and I printed about 10 or 15 of the rapid cartridges already on the 3D printer for a range of ASAs, but I gotta glue them all and put the felt in, and then give it a go. So
I made sure to give you 2 good cassettes, right?
There's one, I think, in there.
It was in there. Oh, that's right. You only need, I can't remember. So you haven't shot it yet then?
So I haven't shot it yet. I just got it back, and I'm really excited to actually shoot it.
I'm glad.
Got a little strap that feels nice, and it feels like a really, really going to be good.
I'm glad that camera wound up with you.
They are hard to find. I was looking for
a
second one just so I could kind of mess with it and stuff, and I can't find another one. I found one and got way outbid for it on eBay, and haven't been able to find another one since.
These are pretty hard to find too. The Mamiya, My Rapid.
Yeah,
it's a Mamiya. It's basically the exact same camera. It uses the rapid cassettes, and then Canon had the Demi Rapid, or the Dial Rapid.
Okay.
Paul, looks like we're winding down here. What's your last one?
The old Nikon F.
Nikon F, yep.
Bill Smith from our Canadian friend couldn't make it tonight. He had something else he had to do, but he was talking about representing his father's Nikon F with serial number 641, which is very, very early. So I told him I would show my 642, which is a little bit later than his, but still quite an early model.
Is that the macro lens on there, the 55?
Yeah, this is the original macro, the original 55. My feeling is that if I had to have one lens ever, it would be the Nikon 55 micro. It's just a sharp lens at infinity. Yeah. It goes half-life size. It balances well. It's just a wonderful lens, and they made a lot of variations of it. But this particular one is very early.
You might know this, but generally Nikkor lenses hold up very well. but there was a rash of those macro lenses where the lubricants dry up on them. I don't know which series of them did it, but I do know though that there was a wide range of time where those macro lenses were made in time to today. They can often be found with incredibly stiff focus.
Yeah, I see them. I see them all the time.
Yeah.
And you're right. They're the AI versions.
It's it.
And
Okay.
they're
I couldn't
early.
remember.
They're early AI, and they are completely frozen up. I mean,
Yeah.
just Nikon for some reason, when they were into the AI lenses, the helicoids on some of them were aluminum on aluminum, and they were extremely sloppy.
Yeah.
They had hardly any resistance at all. And then this opposite extreme, that the lubricants dried up and they were very hard to move. I've got a 20 millimeter right now that the 20 was one of the lenses that had the aluminum on aluminum on the early versions.
Is that the 3.5 or the 4?
It was a 3.5.
Okay.
It was very sloppy focus. The one I have is really, really tight. It's almost the opposite extreme.
There was just a small era, like you said, they probably just got a deal or switched vendors. Because back then they didn't know. I mean, things were made to last, but they had no idea how this stuff would hold up half a century later. You know, I mean, I'm sure Oscar Barnack would be impressed that people are still shooting his cameras today, but even he couldn't imagine that some guys on something called the internet with a podcast to be talking about shooting Leicas, 90 years after he sold his. So, all right, well, cool, awesome. Nikon is definitely well represented. We had an F and F2. We had a Nikonos 5 and then the FM2. Only one Leica so far. We've had a couple Horsemans, which I think is a big surprise. 2 3D printed cameras. We have the Fuji, the 617 that Anthony had mentioned, his Zeiss Contax. A Zeiss camera that I love, but I've talked about it so many times, is the original Contax. I just adore that camera, and it helps that I had one CLA'd, which improves its usability. Andrew, did you have one more?
I do indeed. This one is kind of my chaotic option. I would bring my Polaroid SX70 sonar because frankly, it might be my most used camera, more than like my Nikon FA, and my Rollei SL66 would probably supersede it. But still, I love the SX70. It is such a funky, weird design, and I'm a huge fan of instant film. I think my generation, all the Gen Zers really like instant film because that's what we kind of grew up with, being the analog that was obtainable. And the SX70 is certainly an interesting camera. I wouldn't say it's like a stellar camera. It's a bit awkward to use, full honesty. And the viewfinder is not very easy to peer through, but the design, the portability, and the very lomographic results you get from modern Polaroid film, like post Impossible Project, is just overall such a fun time. And like I have the attachable flash bar, so I get this really great camera for parties where I can just snap pictures of my friends and whatnot. And I've honestly gotten a lot of really good results out of my 670. I converted it to modern 600 film myself. There's just a capacitor you go in and replace. It's not the easiest job, but I was able to do it with a soldering iron in the afternoon.
And in a dark party with that sonar autofocus, that thing can see in pure darkness.
That's right.
With a flash, you could be in a pitch black room and it'll get the focus correct, which is something you can't see today. Okay, so Robin's holding up a sun, it looks like. I can't tell quite exactly what that is. And then Christopher Wells held up a white and tan SX70. So let me ask you, Andrew. I reviewed my SX70. It's been a couple years, and it was right around the time when Impossible was rebranded as Polaroid Originals. And I remember at the time it felt like each generation of film was getting better and better. But I have not purchased any fresh Polaroid film in a couple years now. Has it continued to improve, or have they sort of plateaued in terms of quality, in your opinion?
It certainly has improved. I'm a huge nerd about instant film. I've gone through a whole era of reading the Polaroid patents and whatnot. I've actually been trying to kind of reinvent peel apart film.
Good luck.
Yeah, it's weird stuff. But the Impossible Projects, I think they're Polaroid Originals now is their brand name. Yes. Their emulsion is definitely much stronger. It's far from perfect, unfortunately. Like, especially after using a Lomograph lock for a couple months now, Instax still outpaces it in fidelity, I'd say. But the emulsion seems much more stable. You definitely get a good, strong year out of a pack of film before it starts to show major issues. The color science is pretty good. I'd say it beats Instax film in its dynamic range primarily. And I also just prefer the color palette, and I like the square format.
See, for me, the last time I shot my SX70, I actually preferred the black and white over the color. I really liked the look of the monochrome film.
Well, I have great news for you. Just a couple months ago, they released a new black and white emulsion. I've not got to try it yet. Christopher has, and it is fantastic. It is as sharp as Fujifilm and develops as fast as Fujifilm. So they certainly have made a lot of progress. And I've actually wanted to give their smaller format Polaroid Go a try. I wish there's more backs for medium format SLRs available that shot Polaroid Go film.
I was gonna add in, I don't have any of the shots I took in the new black and white formula like handy and easy to show you guys, but I can attest that it's better than the old stuff, and it doesn't like age poorly and brown out like people said that the old formulas do. It's good stuff and it's worth picking up if you ever find it.
Did they give it a new name, or is it just the same name, just new?
It's the same name, just new from what I understand. The packaging, they changed the design, so it's not the
Okay.
like, old look. It's the way they shaped the like black and white grayscale, like in the front. It's like diagonal or something. So it's subtle, but it should be most all of what you find in black and white now. I think they've kind of phased the old stuff out.
Okay. Very cool.
All available at Walmart.
Yeah,
All right.
exactly. I order mine from B&H usually. Really quick, if you can kind of see through my camera, it's probably really poor quality because of reflection. But I have actually a picture of Christopher here with his SX70, and
The contrast
this was
looks
done with
pretty
my
good.
flash. And yeah, it's for I think Polaroid film really, the integral film really excels with a flash. It seems to take well to being cooked alive with the super
Cool.
bright flashes that you have to use. But it's certainly satisfactory results. You can't expect anything equivalent to like color negative film, but it certainly gets the job done and
Yeah.
has about the same dynamic range as, slide film.
All right, Robin, what's your third one?
Can we bring luggage along?
Sure. Paul's bringing
If it
bags.
is, then it's my Ilford darkroom tent.
An entire
I
dark
figure I
room.
could earn some shells that way,
Very good. All right,
start a
we're gonna
small
pick crucial.
industry.
Steven, did you do a third one?
No, not yet. I'm really glad we got another autofocus camera there finally, because everything pretty much is being very focused on manual focus cameras. And I feel like this desert island might have some wildlife and some interesting birds and land creatures, who knows. So for that sort of thing, with a long telephoto lens, with a zoom lens, I'd really want an autofocus camera. Anything at a reasonable photo length, 135 millimeters, maybe 200 millimeters, sure, I'll focus that manually, but anything longer, I'd want autofocus. And so many choices in that, it was very difficult to narrow it down. But ultimately, the two that came to mind, very closely related cameras, the Pentax MZ5N or ZX5N, if you're in the US, and its sibling, which would actually be preferable, is the MZ3. And this was only sold as the MZ3. And the reason being that the MZ5N or ZX5N has a 2-second shutter speed as the slowest and a 1/2000th as the fastest. But the MZ3, which was a slightly later model, only sold in certain markets, it drops the 2-second time and gives you 1/4000th. So if you are in that bright light and being those fast shutter speeds, once again, like the FM2, that would be something that I would want on a desert island.
And it looks like it's pretty lightweight too.
Yeah, they're very plasticky, so they're not going to survive being dropped, but they're very light and easy to take with you. They run off of CR123 batteries, I believe, or is it CR2s? I used to know that off by heart. But there's also a battery grip available that is really just sits at the bottom of the camera and will hold AA batteries. So you've got some versatile power options for that.
There were so many good autofocus, consumer grade SLRs from that era. You and I were talking about the Nikon N80, the F80. I have a Maxim 5, which was a consumer grade. I think mine's got like a champagne body. It's a no frills camera, but it works great. I mean, those cameras had accurate meters. They had accurate autofocusing. They were ergonomically good. They had great viewfinders. I mean, I like to refer to that grade of camera as a point and shoot SLR because it's pretty much what they are, but it doesn't mean they're bad. They're fantastic.
Yeah, they all get fantastic results. And the reason I choose these is because you've got a physical dial for exposure compensation, a physical shutter speed dial with marked shutter speeds. With most Pentax lenses, you've got a physical aperture ring on them. So you've got that kind of tying back to the way things used to be, as opposed to the sort of modal interfaces and hold a button and roll a wheel type of thing, and looking at screens and PASM modes and that sort of thing. That perfectly usable, but there is something nice about having a camera that when it's switched off, you can just look at those dials and set them the way you want, and see where your camera is before you even turn it on and have to look at an LCD.
Because I could see AJ's preoccupied. I'm pulling up eBay, looking at what the MZ3 is sell for. So very reasonably priced. My issue is I don't have any autofocus Pentax lenses.
They work perfectly well with the manual focus ones, especially if you get an A lens, which has the automatic setting for the aperture. And if they don't, if it's like an M lens or a K lens, then you can still use it with aperture priority or manual exposure. And how long the K mount has been compatible is pretty incredible, because even some of the modern autofocus designed for digital lenses, designed for APS, they will work on the camera. If they don't have an aperture ring, you can't control the aperture, but you can set that up automatically. Shutter priority or program exposure work just fine. And some of those lenses that are made for APS-C cameras will cover the full 35 millimeter frame. And the ones that don't, you've actually got a panoramic mode on a lot of these cameras, and that will put a mask in the viewfinder and on the film plane, top and bottom, cut that off. And in some cases, that gives you enough coverage with some of those digital APS-C lenses that you can get a decent panoramic shot out of them. So there's a long-lived time that came out has been useful, and it's even still going to this day.
I definitely like the mechanical knob. I do like that a lot. I think I may have an MZ3 in my future.
You just got to watch, because those have that plastic mirror gear that tends to break. So
yeah.
If you can get a photo, if the body cap or lens is removed and the mirror is up in the listing with the camera switched off, then you know it's suffered that fault. Yeah.
All right.
And if the mirror is down in the photo, then it hasn't suffered it yet, but it might very shortly.
Do we miss anybody? Or do we have any honorable mentions?
If we're talking about the compact, my Minox 35 GL.
Now, does that use the silver oxide batteries, or is that still a mercury?
That's exactly what I was doing before.
Okay, because there is a point where they switch, and I cannot remember which ones use.
No, I think it still used a PX27.
This is a PX27.
Yeah.
Okay. You could get an adapter, but you might get off metering. But
Amazon has they have the XL.
XL, yeah,
they're good batteries, and they also have another one called Golden Power. And the Golden Powers work better in the Minoxes than they do in anything else that takes a PX20.
Dad will convert them for you, right? Didn't we talk about that?
Yeah, I think he will.
Yeah,
Because he converts the Minox, the LX, he will convert to a PX28.
Paul, you said it was the gold. What was it?
Golden
Battery?
Power.
Golden
Power. Yeah, Amazon has them. They're a lot cheaper than the XL.
We were talking about plastic cameras. This is one of my favorite.
The Bel Air.
The Bel Air. It's 6x12, 6x9 masks that go in it. It's a fun little camera. It gets actually relatively sharp, 2 interchangeable plastic lenses, but it works.
so it's like a toy camera, or I mean, I've never seen one of those before.
Kind of based on, I guess, the old Polaroid style.
And what kind? And he uses roll film.
It uses 120 roll film.
120. Oh,
Yeah, didn't we talk about that in a few episodes back?
that must have been my brain dead episode. I don't know. I don't remember. We're at 88 episodes, for Christ's sakes. Well, that's very cool. I like the way it looks too. I like that brown leather, body covering on like a faux chrome. Looks like.
Yeah, it's aluminum and plastic. So
Is it aluminum? Okay.
it's very thin aluminum, but it does.
Yeah. I do like that. That's neat.
Yep.
All right. Well, I had an honorable mention, and the reason I took it off is because I thought it was too bulky. But after seeing what you guys are bringing, I think this would be more than appropriate. But I've only shot this camera once, and I fell in love with it, and I definitely would want to spend more time with it again. But it's the Graflex Narita 66. I really thought I would love the Pentax 6.7, and I do. This is a 6.6. But similar form factor. It's like essentially picture a 35 millimeter SLR but supersized. All the shutter speed dial, the film advance lever is in the exact same spot. The pentaprism works exactly the same. What we talked to is this is one of the very, very few medium format lenses. It's f2, not f2.8. It's an 80 millimeter Noritar f2 lens. I shot this thing one time and I don't think I have ever gone through a 12 exposure roll of 120 as fast as I did on this camera. Like I finished it in like 15 minutes. I was just walking around, click, 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 click. I just enjoyed it that much. So I really like this camera. This one's in excellent condition, 6x6 120. So that would be my honorable mention, since we have room for Ilford development stands and a lot of these large, heavy cameras. We're getting to the end. We're coming up on 2 hours here. So, it's kind of interesting how quickly the time flies when you're just rattling off gas. This is going to be a tough Instagram episode. Lots of things for Anthony to find.
Lots of cameras.
The Retina episode, we really didn't have much because we kind of stuck with the mostly pre-war and just we dabbled in on the post-war. But that episode turned out really good. David wants to come back maybe sometime in August or something, and maybe we'll do post-war using Retinas, because we really didn't get at all into using them. I have some thoughts on my favorite of the post-war models. There's a lot of really good ones. As much as I love the pre-war models, they're not the first models I'd recommend for someone wanting to shoot one. So we're going to definitely do that again. But does anybody have any questions for us?
I had one question, Paul.
Sure.
In the beginning, what was the rangefinder you had on the Horseman?
An Akameter, Akameter.
Okay.
And that was a German, the Aka camera. I think it's the cheapest one you can find. The Voigtlanders are really expensive, and
it goes on this camera. The Akameter goes on this one.
Got it. Hey,
the Acarel.
I just bought one on the lens adapting episode where I had the lens.
Mm-hmm.
So I tried to find one so that I could see if it works. So I got one of these guys.
Yeah.
And,
oh, cool.
That rangefinder Paul has was made for this camera because this company had another camera called the Acarex, which was a rangefinder. The Acarel and Acarettes are not, even though they have two windows, they are scale focus, and the Akameter was the rangefinder for this camera. But like Paul's saying, it works with anything.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to.
What was the company, Mike? It was Aka.
It's AKA Apparat and Camerabao.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
An interesting history in that company too.
Yeah.
Yeah, the camera's really interesting. It turned up on eBay and it was really, really cheap. So I was like, I'll just go for it and see. The shutter's completely frozen, but it looks pretty simple to work on. But now I have both of the lenses, so yeah, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, Apparat and Camerabao is interesting because they were founded in February 1946, which is super, like not even a year after the war ended in Germany. And most of the companies hadn't even restored their factories yet to start making anything that early. Yet there was a brand new company that came out of nowhere in 46 from Germany making new cameras that quickly, which I'm sure there's a story there somewhere, but we probably don't know what it is. Any other questions? Any other last minute purchases? Anybody buy anything in the middle of this show?
I did. I bought a Leica 3. I bought a Leica 3F with a 51.5 Sumaret.
There you go. That's a good one.
Facebook Marketplace.
Oh boy, Paul's wheeling and dealing.
And I'm in negotiations for an S2 Nikon with a 35-2.5.
That's a beautiful. That's the lens from the Nikono. Same exact optical formula. Is it a black dial or chrome dial?
No, it's a silver dial.
Silver dial. Yeah, the black dials are later. They're a little bit more rare.
Yeah,
but I think it looks better with the silver dials personally. I just want to, thank everybody for coming on the show. Okay, here we go. Andrew and Chris, you're still here. Good. And Robin, you too. We have been talking one of the most sought after topics for us to do an episode on has been large format. And we've been wanting to do a large format episode for a long time, or wet plates, whatever you want to talk about. We'll probably have to start that show off with what exactly even is large format, because I think different people have different opinions in what it means. But I had a reader contact me a listener of the show who said that if we ever do a large format episode to have him on. Paul, wasn't there somebody that you or Theo was going to reach out to?
Yeah, Mark Corneliuson down in Lexington taught at may still teach at UK.
Okay,
but he's also a retired photojournalist, and he has actually a tintype studio in Lexington. He's doing
Okay.
some great stuff. So we're going to see him at the camera show, and we'll talk to him about coming on the show too.
That's right. So we're not going to do it until after the show then, right?
Right. We were talking
I
about doing
gotcha.
it in early April.
So that won't be the next episode then. I'm sorry.
No.
Then I have no idea what our next episode is going to be about.
You made a list, Mike. You got a list there somewhere.
We kept moving it around.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're going to do cameras of the 90s at some point. Maybe that would be a good time to do it in 2 weeks.
That has to be episode 90 though. I'm a
That's
stickler
right.
on that.
Yeah, you're right. It does. It has to be.
So this is episode 88. So 89 will be whatever we choose to do, unless we abort it for whatever reason. Will be Monday, March 10th at the usual time. And that will mean that episode 90 will definitely be Cameras of the 90s. That will be Monday, March 24th at the usual time. So TBD on the next show or when we do large format. So Chris and Andrew, I guess you have a little more time to prepare. But we'd love to have you guys come back. I think one of the things that impresses me so much about large format is how much of all the different subgenres and genres of cameras and photography, it's the one that 3D printing has pushed the furthest. There's so many cool projects out there that you could literally make your own camera. And I mean, to suggest that was even possible 5-10 years ago, people would think you were crazy. But the amount of options that you have for making your own stuff, whether it's your own bellows, your frames, mount a vintage lens on there, or just get some brand new adapted lens or whatever you want to do, the possibilities are endless. And when we do get to that episode, you all will have the benefit of probably the Camerosity podcast episode that I will speak the least on, because I have almost nothing to contribute.
You're going to have a lot of homework to do.
I have to do a lot of homework. Yeah. A little crash course or something. As always, the topics and discussions on the Camerosity podcast are influenced and demanded by you guys. Really appreciate all the feedback we've gotten for the last few episodes. The Retina episode was based off of something that you guys wanted to hear. Previous episodes to that we've done based on your feedback. So please keep the suggestions coming. Don't think that the only way to get your ideas heard, though, is to shoot us a message on Facebook, Discord, or email. Just come on the show. We have episodes like this from time to time where we just want to hear what you're shooting and what you're playing with. That's the greatest strength of this show. So I appreciate you guys coming out and staying with us for 2 hours tonight. I hope you guys have a good rest of your week and have a good night.
Good night, everybody.
Cool.
Have a wonderful week, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Here's a funny story. This morning, first thing, I put that 500 ELX Hasselblad up on Facebook Marketplace. I get an email from a guy who says, "Hey, you just had this CLA. Why are you selling it?" And I said, "Because I can't keep everything that passes through my hands." So that we started talking. He's a young guy down in Knoxville, Tennessee, works at an ad agency. He's talking about how he's repairing some cameras. I said, "Hey, you should listen to Camerosity. Do you know about Camerosity?" And so I sent him. I just mentioned it. That 2 minutes later, I get a link to the Camerosity Podbean. And he said, "I just started listening to this. It's hip to be square." He says, "That's what a great podcast." So now he joined the Facebook group earlier today.
Yeah. I'm waiting for the day that I get recognized in the street. It hasn't happened yet, though. So,
Yeah.
Well, I mean, a friend of mine was listening to the podcast and didn't even realize that I was the one on it. So,
Right. That's funny. All right, guys. See you tomorrow.
Good night, Paul. See you later.
Good night, Paul.
Bye.